Good morning. We are beginning today with the Vishnu Purana, Skandha 1, chapter 15. So we had ended last time with the Prachetasas being absorbed in tapas beneath the ocean for the purpose of vastly increasing the population of the earth by having children. A preliminary step to that being to cultivate great spiritual energy toward that end. Whilst the Prachetasas were thus absorbed in their devotions, the trees spread and overshadowed the unprotected earth, and the people perished. The winds could not blow. The sky was shut out by the forests, and humankind was unable to labor for 10,000 years. When the sages coming forth from the deep beheld this, they were angry, and being incensed, wind and flame issued from their mouths. The strong wind tore up the trees by their roots, and left them sere and dry, and the fierce fire consumed them, and the forests were cleared away. When Soma, Soma Deva, the sovereign of the vegetable world, beheld all except a few of the trees destroyed, he went to the patriarchs, the Prachetasas, and said, "Restrain your indignation, princes, and listen to me. I will form an alliance between you and the trees. Prescient of futurity, I have nourished with my rays this precious maiden, the daughter of the woods. She is called Marisha, and is assuredly the offspring of the trees. She shall be your bride, and the multiplier of the race of Dhruva. From a portion of your luster, and a portion of mine, O mighty sages, the Prajapati Daksha shall be born of her, who endowed with a part of me, and composed of your vigor, shall be as resplendent as fire, and shall multiply the human race." Soma went on, "There was formerly a sage named Kandu, eminent in holy wisdom, who practiced pious austerities on the lovely borders of the Gomati River. The Raja of the Devas sent the Apsara Pramlochi to disturb his tapas, and the sweet-smelling damsel diverted the sage from his devotions. They lived together in the valley of Mandara. Mandara is a mountain, so one of the valleys bordering the mountain Mandara is what that means. For 150 years, during which the mind of the Muni was wholly given up to enjoyment. At the expiration of this period, the Apsara requested his permission to return to heaven, but the Muni, still fondly attached to her, prevailed upon her to remain for some time longer, and the graceful damsel continued to reside for another 100 years, and to delight the great sage by her fascinations. Then again, she preferred her suit to be allowed to return to the abodes of the Devas, and again the Muni desired her to remain. At the expiration of more than a century more, the Apsara once more said to him with a smiling countenance, "Brahman, I depart." But the Muni, detaining the fine-eyed damsel, replied, "Nay, stay yet a little. You will go hence for a long period." Afraid of incurring an imprecation, the graceful Apsara continued with the sage for nearly 200 years more, repeatedly asking his permission to go to the region of the Raja of the Devas, but every time desired by him to remain. Dreading to be cursed by him, and excelling in amiable manners, well knowing also the pain that is inflicted by separation from an object of affection, she did not quit the Muni, whose mind, wholly subdued by love, became every day more strongly attached to her. On one occasion, the sage was going forth from their cottage in a great hurry. The Apsara asked him where he was going. "The day," he replied, "is drawing fast to a close. I must perform the Sandhya worship, or a duty will be neglected." Since by the Dharma Shastras, a Brahman is required to perform that ritual. Ideally, they do it every morning and evening, but it's considered to break the duty if 3 full days pass without observance. The Apsara smiled mirthfully as she rejoined, "Why do you talk, grave sir, of this day drawing to a close? Your day is a day of many years, a day that must be a marvel to all. Explain what this means." The Muni said, "Fair damsel, you came to the riverside at dawn. I beheld you then, and you then entered my hermitage. It is now the revolution of evening, and day is gone. What is the meaning of this laughter? Tell me the truth. Pramlocha answered, You say rightly, venerable Brahman, that I came hither at morning dawn, but several hundred years have passed since the time of my arrival. This is the truth. The Muni, on hearing this, was seized with astonishment, and asked her how long he had enjoyed her society, to which the Apsara replied that they had lived together 907 years, 6 months, and 3 days. The Muni asked her if she spoke the truth or if she was in jest, for it appeared to him that they had spent but 1 day together, to which Pramlocha replied that she should not dare at any time to tell him who lived in the path of piety and untruth, particularly when she had been enjoined by him to inform him what had passed. When the Muni, O princes, had heard these words and knew that it was the truth, he began to reproach himself bitterly. He exclaimed, saying, Fie, fie upon me! My tapas has been interrupted. The treasure of the learned and the pious has been stolen from me. My judgment has been blinded. This woman has been created by someone to beguile me. Brahma is beyond the reach of those agitated by the waves of infirmity. That line may also be interpreted beyond the waves, beyond the reach of those immersed in the 6 urmis, which are hunger, thirst, sorrow, stupefaction, decay, and death. In this case, stupefaction, or mental bewilderment through the objects of senses. I had subdued my passions and was about to attain divine knowledge. This was foreseen by him by whom this girl has been sent hither. Fie on the passion that has obstructed my devotions. All the austerities that would have led to acquisition of the wisdom of the Veda have been rendered of no avail by passion, that is the road to Naraka. The pious sage, having thus reviled himself, turned to the Apsaras, who was sitting nigh, and said to her, Go, deceitful girl, whither you will. You have performed the office assigned to you by the monarch of the Devas of disturbing my tapas by your fascinations. I will not reduce you to ashes by the fire of my wrath. 7 paces together is sufficient for the friendship of the virtuous, but you and I have dwelt together. So that's a reference to the marriage rite, the 7 paces together. In other words, that what he's saying is that for over 900 years, they have been essentially husband and wife. And in truth, what fault have you committed? Why should I be wroth with you? The sin is wholly mine, and that I could not subdue my passions. Yet fie upon you, who to gain favor with Indra have disturbed my devotions, vile bundle of delusion. Thus spoken to by the Muni, Pramlocha stood trembling, whilst big drops of perspiration started from every pore, till he angrily cried to her again, Depart, begone! She then, reproached by him, went forth from his dwelling, and passing through the air, wiped the perspiration from her person with the leaves of trees. The Apsara went from tree to tree, and as with the dusky shoots that crowned their summits she dried her limbs, which were covered with moisture, the child that she had conceived by the Rishi came forth from the pores of her skin in drops of perspiration. The trees received the living dews, and the wind collected them into one mass. This, said Soma, I matured by my rays, and gradually it increased in size, till the exhalation that had rested on the treetops became the lovely girl named Marisha. The trees will grant her to you, Prachetasas. Let your indignation be appeased. She is the progeny of Kandu, the child of Pramlocha, the nursling of the trees, the daughter of the wind and of the moon. The holy Kandu, after the interruption of his pious exercises, went, O excellent princes, to the region of Vishnu termed Purushottama, where Maitreya, where with his whole mind he devoted himself to the adoration of Hari, standing fixed with uplifted arms and repeating the prayers that comprehend the essence of divine truth. So the slipping in of Maitreya here is because, of course, this narration of Soma to the Prachetasas is within the larger narration of Parashara to Maitreya. So this line, repeating the prayers that comprehend the essence of divine truth. The actual phrase there is Brahma Paramayam Japam. And that phrase can be read in many different ways. The translator here shares a note. And I think it's worth sharing this translator's note, even though it's kind of long. I wouldn't share everyone like this. The reason being I think this is an excellent opportunity to sort of show the depth of Sanskrit phrases like this and how many ways they can be read. So, Brahma Paramayam Japam means made up of the farther boundary of Brahma, implying either comprehending the supreme and transcendental, or Brahman and transcendental wisdom, para, or consisting of the farthest limits, since para means supreme or ultimate, but it can also mean limit, like the farthest possible limit, the greatest possible. Consisting of the farthest limits or truth of the Vedas, or Brahma, that is, being of the essence of Vedanta philosophy. So it could also mean that comprehend the essence of Vedanta philosophy. The hymn which then follows is in fact a mantra commencing with the words para and para, meaning the supreme, the infinite, or the farther limit, or literally the farther bank of a body of water. And in that sense also the specific point on the farther bank of a body of water that a voyage seeks, like a raft crossing a river aiming for a dock, or a harbor across the ocean that a ship is aiming for, which is a common Vedantic metaphor for the target of moksha across the ocean of samsara. Vishnu then is para, that which nothing surpasses, and para, the end or the object of existence across the ocean of samsara. He is aparapara, the farthest bound of that which is illimitable, or of space and time. He is param parebhya, above or beyond the highest, being beyond or superior to all the elements. He is paramartha rupi, or identical with final truth or knowledge of the soul. He is brahma para, the object or essence of spiritual wisdom. Parapata bhuta is said to imply the farther limit, para, of rudimental matter, para. He is para, or chief paranam, of those objects which are beyond the senses, and he is para, or the boundary of boundaries. That is, he is the comprehensive investiture of and exterior to those limits by which the soul is confined. He is, in other words, free from all encumbrance or impediment, being outside of all boundaries. So this one brief passage of only 2 words may be interpreted in many different ways according to the ingenuity with which the riddle is read. The Prachetasas said, "We are desirous to hear the transcendental prayers, by inaudibly reciting which the pious Kandu propitiated Keshava." Inaudibly reciting meaning, of course, mentally, not chanting out loud. On which Soma repeated as follows the mental prayers of Kandu. Vishnu is beyond the boundary of all things. He is the infinite. He is beyond that which is boundless. He is above all that is above. He exists as finite truth. He exists as finite truth as well as infinite. He is the object of the Veda, the limit of elemental being, unappreciable by the senses, possessed of illimitable might. He is the cause of cause, the cause of the cause of cause, the cause of finite cause, and in effects, he both is every object and agent. He both as every object and agent preserves the universe. He is Brahma the Lord, Brahma all beings, Brahma the Prajapati of all beings, the imperishable, or Achyuta. He is the eternal, undecaying, unborn Brahma, incapable of increase or diminution. Purushottama is the everlasting, uncreated, immutable Brahman. May the imperfections of my nature be annihilated through his favor. Soma said, "It was reciting this eulogium, the essence of divine truth, and propitiating Keshava, that Kandu obtained final emancipation. Who Marisha was of old, I will also relate to you, as the recital of her meritorious acts will be beneficial to you. She was, obviously referring to in her previous incarnation, the widow of a prince, and left childless at her husband's death. She therefore zealously worshipped Vishnu, who, being gratified by her adoration, appeared to her and desired her to demand a boon, on which she revealed to him the wishes of her heart. I have been a widow, Lord, she exclaimed, even from my infancy, and my birth has been in vain. Since, particularly in royal families, to make political alliances, evidently she was betrothed to this prince when she was an infant by her family. Unfortunate have I been, and of little use, O sovereign of the world. Now therefore I pray to you that in succeeding births I may have honorable husbands, and a son equal to a patriarch amongst men. May I be possessed of affluence and beauty, may I be pleasing in the sight of all, and may I be born out of the ordinary course. Grant these prayers, O you who are propitious to the devout." Soma said, "Rishikesha, the god of gods, the supreme giver of all blessing, thus prayed to, raised her from her prostrate attitude, and said, in another life you shall have 10 husbands of mighty prowess, and renowned for glorious acts, and you shall have a son magnanimous and valiant, distinguished by the rank of a patriarch, from whom the various races of men shall multiply, and by whose prosperity the universe shall be filled. But by whose posterity the universe shall be filled. You virtuous lady shall be of marvelous birth, and you shall be endowed with grace and loveliness, delighting the heart of men." Thus having spoken, the deity disappeared, and the princess was accordingly afterwards born as Marisha, who was given to you for a wife. That particular part of the story is not from the Bhagavatam. It is interesting to read versions in other Puranas like this that give extra tidbits. That this tidbit was given by Parashara to Maitreya, but it was not mentioned by Shuka to Parikshit. So you get little extra pieces like this. Parashara said, Soma having concluded, the Prachetasas took Marisha, as he had enjoined them righteously to wife, relinquishing their indignation against the trees, and upon her they begot the eminent Prajapati Daksha, who had in a former life been born as the son of Brahma. This great sage, for the furtherance of creation and the increase of humankind, created progeny. Obeying the command of Brahma, he made movable and immovable things, bipeds and quadrupeds, and subsequently by his will gave birth to females, 10 of whom he bestowed on Dharmadeva, 13 on Prajapati Kashyapa, and 27 who regulate the course of time on the moon god. Those, of course, being the Nakshatra Devis. Of these, the Devas, the Asuras, the Nagas, cattle and birds, the singers and dancers of the courts of heaven, being the Gandharvas and Apsaras, the spirits of evil, Rakshasas, and other beings were born. From that period forwards, living creatures were engendered by sexual intercourse. Before the time of Daksha, they were variously propagated by the will, by sight, by touch, and by the influence of religious austerities, tapasya, practiced by devout sages and holy saints. Maitreya said, Daksha, as I have formerly heard, was born from the right thumb of Brahma. Tell me, great Muni, how he was regenerated as the son of the Prachetasas. Considerable perplexity also arises in my mind how he who, as the son of Marisha, was the grandson of Soma, could also be Soma's father-in-law. Parashara said, birth and death are constant in all creatures. Rishis and sages possessing divine vision are not perplexed by this. Daksha and the other eminent munis are present in every age, and in the interval of destruction cease to be. Of this the wise man entertains no doubt. Amongst them of old there was neither senior nor junior. Rigorous tapas and acquired power were the sole causes of any difference of degree amongst these more than human beings. Maitreya said, "Narrate to me, O venerable Brahman, at length the birth of the Devas, Asuras, Gandharvas, Nagas, and goblins." I'm guessing that by goblins here is meant yakshas. Parashara said, "In what manner Daksha created living beings as commanded by Brahma, you shall hear. In the first place, he willed into existence the Devas, the Rishis, quiristers of heaven, the Asuras, and the Nagas. Finding that his will-born progeny did not multiply themselves, he determined, in order to secure their increase, to establish sexual intercourse as their means of multiplication. For this purpose, he espoused Asikni, the daughter of the Prajapati Virana, a damsel addicted to devout practice, the eminent supportress of the world. By her, the great father of mankind begot 5,000 mighty sons through whom he expected the world should be peopled. Narada, the divine Rishi, observing them desirous to multiply posterity, approached them and addressed them in a friendly tone. Narada said, "Illustrious Haryasvas, it is evident that your intention is to beget posterity. But first consider this. Why should you, who, like fools, know not the middle, the height, and depth of the world, propagate offspring? When your intellect is no more obstructed by interval, height, or depth, then how, fools, shall you not all behold the term of the universe?" Parashara said, "Having heard the words of Narada, the sons of Daksha dispersed themselves through the region, and to the present day they have not returned. As rivers that lose themselves in ocean come back no more. The Haryasvas having thus disappeared, the Prajapati Daksha begot by the daughter of Virana 1,000 more sons. They, who were named Savalasvas, were also desirous of engendering posterity, but were dissuaded by Narada in a similar manner. They said to one another, what the Muni has observed is perfectly just. We must follow that path that our brothers have traveled. And when we have ascertained the extent of the universe, we will then multiply our race." Accordingly, they scattered themselves through the regions, and like rivers flowing into the sea, they returned not again. Henceforth, brother seeking for brother disappears through ignorance of the products of the first principle of things. Daksha the Prajapati, on finding that all these his sons had vanished, was incensed and denounced a curse upon Narada. Now, one point about this. When Narada essentially challenges them to find the limits of the universe, one of the traditional commentators on the Vishnu Purana reads it differently and explains it to mean not of the external universe, but the origin, duration, and termination of the subtle body within themselves. However, the same story appears in the Padma Purana and the Linga Purana, and both give it as very specifically the extent of the earth. So there are both of those possible interpretations of this story. Then Maitreya, the wise Prajapati, it is handed down to us, being anxious to people the world, created 60 daughters of the daughter of Virana, 10 of whom he gave to Dharma, 13 to Kashyapa, and 27 to Soma, as we have already heard, 4 to Arishtanemi, 2 to Bahuputra, 2 to Angiras, and 2 to Krashashva. I will tell you their names. Arundhati, Vasu, Yami, Lamba, Bhanu, Marutvati, Sankalpa, Muhurta, Sadhya, and Vishwa, with the 10 wives of Dharma, and bore him the following progeny. The sons of Vishva were the Vishvadevas, and the Sadhyas were the children of Sadhya. The Maruts, or the wind gods, were the children of Marutvati, the Vasus of Vasu. The Bhanus, who are a type of solar devas, were the children of Bhanu, and the deities presiding over the moments of Muhurta, the goddess of the hour. Ghosha was the son of Lamba. Nagavitta, the daughter of Yami. So Nagavitta is a star goddess, a goddess of the Milky Way galaxy, the daughter of Yami, a goddess of the night. The divisions of the earth were born of Arundhati, and Sankalpa, the soul of all, was the son of Sankalpa. The deities called Vasus, because preceded by fire, they abound in splendor and might, are severally named Apa, Dhruva, Soma, Dhava, fire, Anila, wind, Anala, fire again, Pratyusha, daybreak, and Prabhasa, or light. The four sons of Apa were Vaitandya, Srama, Sranta, and Dhur. Kala, or time, the cherisher of the world, was the son of Dhruva. The son of Soma was Varchas, a deva of light, who was the father of Varchasvi, or radiance. Dhava had, by his wife Manohara, Dravina, Hutahavyavaha, Shishra, Prana, and Ramana. The two sons of Anila, a wind deva, by his wife Shiva, were Manohara, swift as thought, and Avijñatagati, or untraceable motion. The son of Agni, Kumara, was born in a clump of shara reeds. His son, that is a reference to Kumara as in Skanda Kumara or Kartikeya. More famous as a son of Shiva, but since we haven't introduced Shiva into this genealogy yet, he is also a son of Agni. It's a long story explaining that. But he was born in a clump of shara reeds. That's very distinctive and is definitely talking about him. His sons were Saka, Visaka, Naigameya, and Prishtaja. The offspring of the Kritakas was named Kartikeya, referring to one and the same being, Kumara and Kartikeya. The son of Pratyusha was the rishi named Devala, who had two philosophic and intelligent sons. Their names are not given here, but they are given in the Mahapurana as Kshamavarta and Manasvya, referred to as the patient and the wise, respectively. The sister of Brihaspati, the lovely and virtuous Yoga Siddha, who pervades the whole world without being devoted to it, was the wife of Prabhasa, the eighth of the Vasus, and bore to him the Prajapati Vishvakarma, the author of 1,000 arts, the mechanist of the Devas, the fabricator of all ornaments, the chief of artists, the constructor of the self-moving Vimana chariots of the deities, and by whose skill men obtain subsistence. Ajaikapad, Ahirvradna, and the wise Rudra Tvashtri were born, and the self-born son of Tvashta was also the celebrated Vishvarupa. There are 11 well-known Rudras, lords of the three worlds, or Hara, Bahurupa, Triambaka, Aparajita, Prashakapi, Shambhu, Kapardi, Revata, Mrigavyadha, Sarva, and Kapali. But there are 100 appellations of the immeasurable mighty Rudras. The daughters of Daksha who were married to Kashyapa were Aditi, Diti, Danu, Arishta, Surasa, Surabhi, Vinata, Tamra, Krodhavasha, Ida, Kasha, Kadru, and Muni, whose progeny I will describe to you. There were 12 celebrated deities in a former Manvantara called Tuakhas, or also called Tushitas, who upon the approach of the present period, or in the reign of the last Manu, Chakshusha, assembled and said to one another, "Come, let us quickly enter into the womb of Aditi, that we may be born in the next Manvantara, for thereby we shall again enjoy the rank of gods." And accordingly they were born the sons of Kashyapa, the son of Marichi, by Aditi, the daughter of Daksha. Thence named the 12 Adityas, the children of Aditi, whose appellations were respectively Vishnu, specifically the Vamana avatar of Vishnu, Shakra, Shakra being another name for Indra, Aryaman, Bhuti, Dvashtri, Pushan, Vivasvat. Vivasvat is another name better known as Surya, the sun god, Savita, Mitra, Varuna, Ansha, and Bhaga. These, who in the Chakshusha Manvantara, or the gods called the Tushitas, were called the 12 Adityas in the Manvantara of Vaivasvata. The 27 daughters of the Prajapati who became the virtuous wives of the moon were all known as the nymphs of the lunar constellations, or the nakshatras, which were called by their names, and had children who were brilliant through their great splendor. The wives of Arishtanemi bore him 16 children. The daughters of Bahuputra were the 4 lightning goddesses. The excellent Pratyangirasa Richas were the children of Angiras, descended from the holy sage, and the deified weapons of the Devas were the progeny of Krishashva. These classes of 33 divinities are born again at the end of 1,000 ages, according to their own pleasure. And their appearance and disappearance is here spoken of as birth and death. But, Maitreya, these divine personages exist age after age in the same manner as the sun sets and rises again. It has been related to us that Diti had 2 sons by Kashyapa, named Hiranyakashipu and the invincible Hiranyaksha. She had also a daughter, Singhika, the wife of Viprachitti. Hiranyakashipu was the father of 4 mighty sons, Anuhlada, Hlada, the wise Prahlada, and the heroic Sanhlada, the augmenter of the Daitya race. Amongst these, the illustrious Prahlada, looking on all things with indifference, devoted his whole faith to Janardana. Janardana is, of course, a name of Vishnu. The flames that were lighted by the king of the Daityas consumed him not, in whose heart Vasudeva was cherished, and all the earth trembled when, bound with bonds, he moved amidst the waters of the ocean. His firm body, fortified by a mind engrossed by Achyuta, was unwounded by the weapons hurled on him by order of the Daitya monarch, and the serpents sent to destroy him breathed their venomous flames upon him in vain. Overwhelmed with rocks, he yet remained unhurt, for he never forgot Vishnu, and the recollection of the deity was his armor of proof. Hurled from on high by the king of the Daityas, residing in Svarga, earth received him unharmed. The wind sent into his body to wither him up was itself annihilated by him in whom Madhusudana was present. The fierce elephants of the spheres broke their tusks and veiled their pride against the firm breast, which the lord of the Daityas had ordered them to assault. The ministrant priests of the monarch were baffled in all their rights for the destruction of one so steadily attached to Govinda, and the 1,000 delusions of the fraudulent Samvara, counteracted by the discus of Krishna, were practiced without success. The deadly poison administered by his father's officers he partook of unhesitatingly and without its working any visible change. for he looked upon the world with mind undisturbed and full of benignity, regarded all things with equal affection and as identical with himself. He was righteous, an inexhaustible mine of purity and truth, and an unfailing model for all pious man. A few details on some of those. Let me just see here for a minute before I move on to the next section. So when we hear about the daughters of Bahuputra, the 4 lightning devis, they are enumerated as brown, red, yellow, and white lightning, said to portend wind, heat, rain, and famine, respectively. The Pratyangarasa Richas, the children of Angiras, or also called the Ruhas. There's 35 of those, and they embody verses or chandahas addressed to different presiding divinities. And when there was the reference of the deified weapons of the gods were the progeny of Krishashva. So these are called literally the Shastra Devatas, or the weapon gods. It's in the Ramayana, actually, in the Valmiki Ramayana, that they are enumerated. There's 100 of them. And there's a long list of them. They are the spirits of the different astras, or the divine weapons, the progeny of Krishashva. Chapter 16. Maitreya said, "Venerable Muni, you have described to me the races of human beings and the eternal Vishnu, the cause of this world. But who was this mighty Prahlada, of whom you have last spoken, whom fire could not burn, who died not when pierced by weapons, at whose presence in the waters the earth trembled, shaken by his movements even though in bonds, and who, overwhelmed with rocks, remained unhurt? I am desirous to bear an account, to hear an account of the unequaled might of that sage worshipper of Vishnu, to whose marvelous history you have alluded. Why was he assailed by the weapons of the sons of Diti? Why was so righteous a person thrown into the sea? Wherefore was he overwhelmed with rocks? Why bitten by venomous snakes? Why hurled from the mountain crest? Why cast into the flames? Why was he made a mark for the tusks of the elephants of the spheres? Wherefore was the blast of death directed against him by the enemies of the gods? Why did the priests of the Daityas practice ceremonies for his destruction? Why were the 1,000 illusions of Samvara exercised upon him? And for what purpose was deadly poison administered to him by the servants of the king, but which was innocuous as food to his sagacious son? All this I am anxious to hear. The history of the magnanimous Prahlada, a legend of great marvels. Not that it is a wonder that he should have been uninjured by the Daityas, for who can injure the man that fixes his whole heart on Vishnu? But it is strange that such inveterate hatred should have been shown by his own sin to one so virtuous, so unweariedly occupied in worshipping Vishnu. You can explain to me for what reason the sons of Diti offered violence to one so pious, so illustrious, so attached to Vishnu, so free from guile. Generous enemies waged no war with such as he was, full of sanctity and every excellence. How should his own father thus behave towards him? Tell me, therefore, most illustrious Muni, the whole story in detail. I wish to hear the entire narrative of that sovereign of the Daitya race." Chapter 17. Parashara said, "Listen, Maitreya, to the story of the wise and magnanimous Prahlada, whose adventures are ever interesting and instructive. Hiranyakashipu, the son of Diti, had formerly brought the three worlds under his authority, confiding in a boon bestowed upon him by Brahma. He had usurped the sovereignty of Indra and exercised of himself the functions of the sun, of air, of the Lord of waters, of fire, and of the moon. In other words, he had overthrown the devas from Svarga and taken over the seats of Surya, Vayu, Varuna, Agni, Chandra, and Indra. He himself was the god of riches, Kubera. He was the judge of the dead, Yama, and he appropriated to himself without reserve all that was offered in yajna to the gods. The deities, therefore, flying from their seats in heaven, wandered through fear of the Daitya upon the earth, disguised in mortal shapes. Having conquered the three worlds, he was inflated with pride, and eulogized by the Gandharvas, enjoyed whatever he desired. The Gandharvas, the Siddhas, and the Nagas all attended upon the mighty Hiranyakashipu as he sat at the banquet. The Siddhas delighted him, standing before him, some playing on musical instruments, some singing songs in his praise, and others shouting cries of victory, whilst the Apsaras of heaven danced gracefully in the crystal palace, where the Asura, with pleasure, quaffed the inebriating cup. The illustrious son of the Daitya Raja, Prahlada, being yet a boy, resided then in the dwelling of his guru, where he read such writings as are studied in early years. On one occasion he came, accompanied by his teacher, to the court of his father, and bowed before his feet, as he, his father, was drinking. Hiranyakashipu desired his prostrate son to rise, and said to him, "Repeat, boy, in substance and agreeably, what during the period of your studies you have acquired." Prahlada replied, "Hear, O sire, what in obedience to your commands I will repeat, the substance of all I have learned. Listen attentively to that which wholly occupies my thoughts. I have learned to adore him who is without beginning, middle, or end, increase or diminution, the imperishable Lord of the world, the universal cause." Parashara said, on hearing these words, the sovereign of the Daityas, his eyes red with wrath and lips swollen with indignation, turned to the guru of his son and said, "Vile Brahman, what is this preposterous commendation of my foe, that in disrespect to me you have taught this boy to utter?" The guru replied, "O Raja of the Daityas, it is not worthy of you to give way to passion. That which your son has uttered he has not been taught by me." Hiranyakashipu said, "By whom has this lesson, boy, been taught you? Your guru denies that it proceeds from him." Prahlada answered, "Vishnu, father, is the instructor of the whole world. What else should anyone teach or learn, save him, the supreme spirit?" "Blockhead!" exclaimed the king. "Who is this Vishnu, whose name you thus reiterate so impertinently before me, who am the sovereign of the three worlds?" "The glory of Vishnu," replied Prahlada, "is to be meditated upon by the devout. It cannot be described. He is the supreme Lord who is all things, and from whom all things proceed." To this the king rejoined, "Are you desirous of death, fool, that you give the title of supreme Lord to anyone whilst I survive?" "Vishnu, who is Brahman," said Prahlada, "is the creator and protector not of me alone, but of all human beings, and even of you, father. He is the supreme Lord of all. Why should you be offended, sire?" Hiranyakashipu thus exclaimed, "What evil spirit has entered into the breast of this silly boy, that thus like one possessed he utters such profanity?" "Not into my heart alone," said Prahlada, "has Vishnu entered, but he pervades all the regions of the universe, and by his omnipresence influences the conduct of all beings, mine and thine, father." "Away with the wretch," cried the king. "Take him to his guru's mansion. By whom could he have been instigated to repeat the lying praises of my foe?" According to the commands of his father, Prahlada was conducted by the Daityas back to the house of his guru, where, assiduous in attendance on his guru, he constantly improved in wisdom. After a considerable time had elapsed, the sovereign of the Asura sent for him again, and on his arrival in his presence, desired him to recite some poetical composition. Prahlada immediately began. "May he from whom matter and soul originate, from whom all that moves or is unconscious proceeds, he who is the cause of all this creation, Vishnu, be favorable unto us." On hearing which, Hiranyakashipu exclaimed, Kill the wretch. He is not fit to live who is a traitor to his friends, a burning brand to his own race. And his attendants, obedient to his orders, snatched up their weapons and rushed in crowds upon Prahlada to destroy him. The prince calmly looked upon them and said, Daityas, as truly as Vishnu is present in your weapons and in my body, so truly shall those weapons fail to harm me. And accordingly, although struck heavily and repeatedly by hundreds of Daityas, the prince felt not the least pain, and his strength was ever renewed. His father then endeavored to persuade him to refrain from glorifying his enemy, and promised him immunity if he would not be so foolish as to persevere. But Prahlada replied that he felt no fear as long as his immortal guardian against all dangers was present in his mind, the recollection of whom was alone sufficient to dissipate all the perils consequent upon birth or human infirmities. Hiranyakashipu, highly exasperated, commanded the serpents to fall upon his disobedient and insane son, and bite him to death with their envenomed fangs. And thereupon, the great Nagas Kuhaka, Takshaka, and Andhaka, charged with fatal poison, bit the prince in every pore of his body. But he, with thoughts immovably fixed on Krishna, felt no pain from their wounds, being immersed in rapturous recollections of that divinity. Then the snakes cried out to the king and said, Our fangs are broken, our jeweled crests are burst, there is fever in our hoods and fear in our hearts, but the skin of the youth is unscathed. Have recourse, monarch of the Daityas, to some other expedient. Ho, elephants of the skies, exclaimed the demon, unite your tusks and destroy this deserter from his father and conspire with my foes. It is thus that often our progeny are our destruction, as fire consumes the wood from which it springs. The young prince was then assailed by the elephants of the skies, as vast as mountain peaks, cast down upon the earth and trampled on and gored by their tusks. But he continued to call to mind Govinda, and the tusks of the elephants were blunted against his breast. Behold, he said to his father, the tusks of the elephants, hard as adamant, are blunted. But this is not by any strength of mine. Calling upon Janardana is my defense against such fearful affliction. Then said the king to his attendants, Dismiss the elephants and let fire consume him. And do you, deity of the winds, blow up the fire, that this wicked wretch may be consumed. And the Danavas piled a mighty heap of wood around the prince and kindled a fire to burn him as their master had commanded. But Prahlada cried, Father, this fire, though blown up by the winds, burneth me not, and all around I behold the face of the skies, cool and fragrant, with beds of lotus flowers. Then the Brahmanas, who were the sons of Bhargava, illustrious priests and reciters of the Samaveda, said to the king of the Daityas, Sire, restrain your wrath against your own son. How should anger succeed in finding a place in such heavenly mansions? As for this lad, we will be his instructors, and teach him obediently to labor for the destruction of your foes. O king, youth is the season of many errors, and you should not therefore be relentlessly offended with a child. If he will not listen to us and abandon the cause of Hari, then we will adopt infallible measures to work his death. The king of the Daityas, thus solicited by the priests, commanded the prince to be liberated from the midst of the flames. Again established in the dwelling of his guru, Prahlada himself gave lessons to the sons of the demons in the intervals of his leisure time. Sons of the offspring of Diti, he was accustomed to say to them, Hear from me the supreme truth. Nothing else is fit to be regarded. Nothing else here is an object to be coveted. Birth, infancy, and youth, and the portion of all creatures, are the portion of all creatures, and then succeeds gradual and inevitable decay, terminating with all beings, children of the Daityas, in death. This is manifestly visible to all, to you as it is to me. That the dead are born again, and that it cannot be otherwise, the sacred texts are warrant. But production cannot be without a material cause, And as long as conception and parturition are the material causes of repeated birth, so long be sure is pain inseparable from every period of existence. The simpleton, in his inexperience, fancies that the alleviation of hunger, thirst, cold, and the like is pleasure. But of truth it is pain, for suffering gives delight to those whose vision is darkened by delusion, as fatigue would be enjoyment to limbs that are incapable of motion. This vile body is a compound of phlegm and other humors. Where are its beauty, grace, fragrance, or other estimable qualities? The fool that is fond of a body composed of flesh, blood, matter, ordure, urine, membrane, marrow, and bones will be likewise enamored even of Naraka. The agreeableness of fire is caused by cold, of water by thirst, of food by hunger. By other circumstances, their contraries are equally agreeable. The child of the Daitya who takes to himself a wife introduces only so much misery into his bosom. For as many as are the cherished affections of a living creature, so many are the thorns of anxiety implanted in his heart. And he who has large possessions in his house is haunted, wherever he goes, with the apprehension that they may be lost or burned or stolen. Thus there is great pain in being born. For the dying man, there are the tortures of the judge of the deceased and of passing again into the womb. If you conclude that there is little enjoyment in the embryo state, you must then admit that the world is made up of pain. Verily I say to you that in this ocean of the world, this sea of many sorrows, Vishnu is your only hope. If you say you know nothing of this, we are children, embodied spirit in bodies is eternal. Birth, youth, decay are the properties of the body, not of the soul. But it is in this way that we deceive ourselves. I am yet a child, but it is my purpose to exert myself when I am a youth. I am yet a youth, but when I become old, I will do what is needful for the good of my soul. I am now old, and all my duties are to be fulfilled. How shall I, now that my faculties fail me, do what was left undone when my strength was unimpaired? In this manner do men, whilst their minds are distracted by sensual pleasures, ever propose and never attain final moksha. They are the thirsting, devoted in childhood to play, and in youth to pleasure. Ignorant and impotent, they find that old age is come upon them. Therefore, even in childhood, let the embodied soul acquire discriminative wisdom, and independent of the conditions of infancy, youth, or age, strive incessantly to be freed. This, then, is what I declare to you. And since you know that it is not untrue, do you, out of regard to me, call to your minds Vishnu, the liberator from all bondage. What difficulty is there in thinking upon him, who, when remembered, bestows prosperity, and by recalling whom to memory day and night, all sin is cleansed away? Let all your thoughts and affections be fixed on him, who is present in all beings, and you shall laugh at every care. The whole world is suffering under a triple affliction. The triple affliction refers to internal distress, external distress, and supernatural distress. In other words, like distress caused by like an internal bodily or mental disease, an external physical injury, or supernatural distress being like natural disasters or extraordinary cosmic acts or influences, etc. What wise man would feel hatred towards beings who are objects of compassion? If fortune be propitious to them, and I am unable to partake of the like enjoyments, yet wherefore should I cherish malignity towards those who are more prosperous than myself? I should rather sympathize with their happiness, for the suppression of malignant feelings is of itself a reward. If beings are hostile and indulge in hatred, they are objects of pity to the wise, as encompassed by profound delusion. These are the reasons for repressing hate, by which are adapted to the capacities of those who see the deity distinct from his creatures. Here briefly what influences those who have approached the truth. This whole world is but a manifestation of Vishnu, who is identical with all things. And if it therefore is to be regarded by the wise as not differing from, It is therefore to be regarded by the wise as not differing from, but the same as themselves. Let us therefore lay aside the angry passions of our race, and so strive that we obtain that perfect, pure, and eternal happiness, which shall be beyond the power of the elements or their deities, of fire, of the sun, of the moon, of wind, of Indra, of the regent of the sea, which shall be unmolested by spirits of air or earth, by yakshas, daityas, or their chiefs, by the nagas or monstrous demigods of Svarga, which shall be uninterrupted by men or beasts, or by the infirmities of human nature, by bodily sickness or disease, or hatred, envy, malice, passion, or desire, which nothing shall molest, and which everyone who fixes his whole heart on Keshava shall enjoy. Verily I say unto you, that you shall have no satisfaction in various revolutions through this treacherous world, but that you will obtain placidity forever by propitiating Vishnu, whose adoration is perfect calm. What here is difficult of attainment when he is pleased? Wealth, pleasure, virtue are things of little moment. That, of course, meaning artha, kama, dharma. Precious is the fruit that you shall gather, be assured, from the exhaustless store of the tree of true wisdom. And I think that's probably a good stopping point, since that ends the chapter. And it's almost 10 o'clock. So next week we can start with the account of the Narasimha avatar.
Thank you, Devana.
Thank you guys all for coming. Yeah.
Jai Sri Krishna.
Jai Sri Krishna.
Thank you, Radha. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Haribol.
Haribol.
David, I have a question.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for reading. Great chapters. There was something I came in a little late and wasn't finding my place initially.
Sure.
In the reading. And you said read something about you read the verse about how beings made children before having sex. They were doing it in other ways.
Yeah, there was a verse about that. Before the time of the second Prajapati Daksha. At the time of the second Prajapati Daksha, it said, is when Prajapati Daksha changed the nature of living beings to reproduce via sex. Because it worked better. It caused them to reproduce more, which was the goal.
Wow. What's a Daksha? That's like a yuga or something? Time period?
No. Daksha was a person, one of the Prajapatis.
Oh, right. Of course.
Yeah.
And wow. Okay. Any calculations or estimates as to when that actually was in the scriptures or your calculations?
Yeah, you could calculate it. Immensely long ago. It was in I believe it was, I think it said it was in the Chakshusha Manvantara. So many vast cosmic cycles ago.
And are there any other like references, are there any other scriptures that go into those details as to those techniques? And why don't we reactivate them? Or could we?
There definitely are other scriptures that go into at least some more detail on some of the other techniques for non-sexual reproduction. I'm not sure of any that go into great detail, like actually like an instructional manual for it.
Right.
There are stories, definitely, of it being done, even like into the present yuga. But in isolated incidents, very rarely. Yeah, I mean, generally, obviously, the sexual reproduction is the way that it was set up for biological organisms in this world, at least in the vast majority of cases. But yeah,
Yeah.
I have heard of stories of like immaculate conception or virgin birth or whatever, from the
Right.
Indian tradition as well.
And they made it sound just like more standard back in
Yeah.
Prajapati.
Back originally, prior to Daksha's time, the other methods were the standard. But they
Wow.
didn't. But the problem was that they didn't work as well, in that there wasn't nearly as much innate biological impetus to pursue them, and so
Oh,
Brahma and Daksha and the people whose dharma was to populate the world with beings kept failing because the beings didn't feel like reproducing.
with the given tech.
Yeah, that's why it was tied to sexual pleasure, which there's such the sex drive in biological organisms tends to be so strong that tying reproduction to that was a really good motivator to cause reproduction to happen. Whereas without that, the beings just simply didn't have as many children as the
And
Prajapatis
sex
wanted
was
them to.
nothing to do with reproduction.
Sorry, what?
Sex had nothing to do with reproduction. It was just some fun pastime like playing tennis.
Well, before that, there isn't that much reference to sex. But perhaps it may have been a method of reproduction, but at least it wasn't the main one.
Wow.
But after that, when it was tied very closely, the Puranas say that it was a much more effective way to get beings to populate the world, to have reproduction be a natural consequence of this intensely alluring, pleasurable urge.
Wow. So interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Got some new goals to set here. Immaculate conception. Look into this. Cool. Thanks so much, Devala. Blessings, everyone. Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
I think there's according to ISKCON, there's a Ekadashi tomorrow throughout America, and actually everywhere except Japan in the world.
Nice. Yeah.
So even India, according to ISKCON, lunar Ekadashi calculations.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Yep. All right.
Hari
Yeah.
Bol.
Sravana Putrada. Sravana Putrada Ekadashi. Yeah. Yeah. So happy Ekadashi tomorrow, everybody.
That's right. It's Putrada bearing a son or something like, or what does it mean? Something about having a. Whoa, we're talking about this right now. This is crazy. Putrada Ekadashi. Right?
Yeah, it's for
means,
the blessing of a son. Putrada literally means the gift of a son. Yeah.
Right. Like, if any time we could do what we're talking about of immaculate conception, if we observe tomorrow's Ekadashi. Holy
That's
cow.
a goal you have.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks so much, Devala. Blessings, everyone.